Awesome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Reese Barnfield. I'm Product Marketing Manager here at DNSFilter, and we are today talking about data export, one of the latest releases and features from DNSFilter. Just a little bit of background, DNSFilter is a proprietary AI-powered DNS threat detection and categorization solution that works on any device, on any network, helping your organization limit risks posed by unsafe and malicious content 7 days faster than the competition. So today we will hit on several topics. We will review capabilities, benefits, and value of data export. We'll have a quick demo presented by the product management team here at DNSFilter, and we will have time for discussion and time to answer your questions very, very shortly. So in the right-hand side of your screen, you should see an area for chat. That's where you will drop in your questions. Feel free to drop those in as we go along. We'll be taking note of those and making sure that we cover those questions for you. So number one, what's data export? This is our solution rather that allows you to transmit DNS traffic to your external services for storage and analysis. You can export this data to something that you're probably familiar with, your SIEM, your SOAR, and other tools. And what this allows you to do is cross-reference and analyze with other data that you have in your organization. So why is this data important, or why is data export important? So uniting your DNS data with other incidents and event data is something that is important in the sense that that DNS data today might be something that is missing from the rest of your data, and something that might be a gap. And with that data, you can fully have the full view of what is going on inside of your organization and compare it to other events or other happenings inside of your org. And this data allows you to take action or perform like a root cause analysis and have that data actionable. Data isn't exactly valuable unless you can actually take action on it. And there's a lot of support for compliance whenever we talk about data and being able to store it. Support for compliance like HIPAA, PCI, and others. So key benefits, data export helps you automate that export process. Something that might have been very, very manual before, you can now automate to bring that data in with the rest of your data in your organization. And it makes your DNS data actionable. I said before, there's not a lot of value in data unless you can actually look at it and take action on it. And you can back up data for longer periods of time. This actually goes back to support for different compliance, whatever that compliance regulation may be. That is definitely where this longer period of time for data storage comes in. And you can analyze trends, correlate events. We will talk about a customer example a little bit later on, but this is where you might go in and do some comparisons with what happened on this piece of data versus what happened on the DNS layer of my organization, and where is the correlation there. And so creating that single pane of glass view for your data, very, very important, making sure that all of that data is united in a single or maybe a couple of locations. And like I said before, the support for PCI, GDPR, HIPAA, SOX compliance, and others, data export can support that. So a few use cases you might have already guessed is taking this data and exporting it to combine with your other data for monitoring, action, and alerting, automating that process rather than manually creating those queries, something that can be extremely time consuming, near impossible if you are trying to do that manually without some sort of system to assist you in doing that. And exporting that data for backup purposes, especially to persist log data for longer periods of time. An enterprise 90-day report will include a 9-day query log, and on the basic or pro plan, a 30-day report or 3-day query log. So wanted to bring on one of my colleagues, Mikey, to help us visualize what we're actually going to see whenever we go into data export and talk about what that looks like, how to enable it. So we will go ahead and hand things over to him. Go ahead, Mikey.
Sure, I got my screen pulled up to the DNSFilter dashboard, and I'm just going to go through a quick demo of how the data export feature works, like just kind of the nuts and bolts of it. Step one is basically to enable the feature in your billing section. So I took a few shortcuts here for webinar purposes, but you can see I have my 78 pro users here and have already activated the data export add-on. Now, once this add-on is activated, you'll have access to it either from the integrations page or also from tools data export. And I already have one export set up now. The first thing I did was set up a Amazon S3 export. And the way to do that is to buckets. So I have a list of buckets here. You set up any bucket in your Amazon S3 account. I left everything at default, but take note of the AWS region and the bucket name. For my purposes, I left these as the rest of these as default, but set those up to meet your needs. So we can see our bucket here. There might be some data. No data yet. Let me see. So I just started streaming data into this a few minutes ago, but it's important to point out that the data does trigger about every 10 minutes, and that can be seen on the facts here on the data export dashboard page. But I do have one of the exports that we did for testing pulled up, so we can take a look at that and see the data in a CSV file. So what the feature is going to do is dump a CSV file about every 10 minutes to your S3 bucket, and now it's available to import into any other tool. You can see the data that's available is very similar to our query log feature. We have the domain, the Anycast resolver that served the request, whether the content was blocked or allowed, and its category. Along with Amazon S3, you can also do one connection at a time. We'll delete this one, and then we can reconfigure with Splunk. I've already set this up as well, just for purposes of this demo, but you can, there's a lot of sensitive information here, so keep mind of that when you're getting these secret keys and tokens. But I'll pull up our sample Splunk instance right here, and I've just done a search for the organization name that I have, which was Vandelay Industries. Obviously, there's a lot more you can do in Splunk, but these are the basics just to show that the data is streaming in, and that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And I'll turn it back over to Reese.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mikey. Let me just go ahead and make sure our slides have returned here.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome, cool. So,
or desktop, I think, actually.
Oh, we're back to the desktop. All right, one moment here. How's that?
Looking good.
Awesome, great. Apologies for the technical glitch there. Yeah, so Mikey, actually, fun fact, my Wi-Fi name is Vandelay Industries. Nice little coincidence there. So let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit and talk about why DNSFilter? Steve, can you kind of walk us through why DNSFilter, why our data export solution?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. I mean, it goes with the rest of the product. Very simple, easy to use. Mikey kind of showed you the sample. We've got 30 plus fields for you to use in data export. We talked to one customer who was able to get this integrated in under 30 minutes. Current platforms we support, you can see there, but really the thing to call out is we are using the HTTP event collector, which most SIEMs support for direct integration. So even though it does say Splunk for that configuration, underneath the covers is a pretty generic connection that a lot of the SIEMs support these days, as well as we obviously have the S3 connection, which exports the CSV. So we try to make it as very agnostic, connect to as many different SIEMs or other platforms to collect that data. And I also included, I just wish some of these webinar meetings would let you click on the links that you see, but we're going to have someone on our team post that in there if you wanted to kind of dig more and see some of those categories or sequences in our documentation. And then we're going to go to the next slide and talk, a little bit about pricing. It's pretty simple and straightforward. It's a quarter per user per month, and then for guest Wi-Fi, it's $1.25 for access point per month. We are, this is our first time kind of putting out a new add-on with this pricing. So obviously, feedback will be welcome as we look at this further. We do think it, obviously adds a ton of value. And to that point with the next slide, some of the, things we've been hearing from customers and how it's being used. I think we talked to someone yesterday who said, it's been very helpful for them to really share the data. And I think that's where a lot of this, it's not so much we're allowing this feature, and kind of to Reese's point earlier, it's more about what you're going to do, what is actionable with this data. So correlating events, we've heard from quite a few folks about taking this information out of DNSFilter, which really gives you a full view of what's going on in your organization, that single pane of glass with other systems or other devices in your environment to correlate and do any sort of actioning or alerting. I know threat hunting is a buzzword out there, but I'm hearing a lot of more organizations, let's just call it what it is, proactive measures for finding these security events. They are looking for the possibilities or the ways to do that. So we see this as a way of enabling that. And of course, we'd love to hear more use cases, how you see using this, or if you have any questions. I dropped my email address in there if you want to talk more, and we'll also post that in the chat if you have any questions or want to reach out. We're always happy to hear from our customers. With that, Reese, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Steve. I will say that before I misspoke, I said drop your questions in the chat. Drop your questions in the questions tab. We've got a few to review there right now. So let's go ahead and bring on the entire team for us. Carl, I believe you might be the only one who has.
I'm the only one that hasn't said a thing yet.
Exactly, right, yeah. So let's talk more about it. Let's kind of get into the meat of Q&A and really dive into why data export is important. So Carl, Steve, Mikey, question for the group. Without data export, what are we looking at here in terms of trying to figure out what is happening in the the DNS traffic versus what's happening everywhere else inside the organization?
I mean, let's be real here, Reese. Adding DNS data to your SIEM solution, gives you the granularity to really be able to pick out and see what transpired before it all went wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Incidents and events make up 2 of the letters in SIEM. So with that rich context of being able to understand, it's not just like, oh, they went to facebook.com and something happened. It's the stuff you don't typically see. It's the the CDNs, it's the underlying components of websites that all make a DNS query that may not be necessarily in the purview of the user or even somebody that's taking a cursory glance at things, but getting under the hood and being able to see, well, geez, this resource on CloudFront, they hit this and something bad happened. So really being able to have that granularity with the rich context of DNS, is a great advantage here.
Awesome. So we've had a few questions come in. Steve, maybe a good question for you. What package is data export available in?
So right now it's available for all the different subscriptions. So whether you're on Pro, Basic, or Enterprise, it'll be available in any of those.
Excellent, great. Grabbing a few more out of the audience here. Whenever we talk about data export, is there any plan to add support for Azure storage?
I think, as Steve alluded to earlier, the way that we've gone about designing these initial, sort of offerings is that there are, sort of standards that allow these integrations to happen. So if Azure is, performing their, data store the same way that Amazon implements S3, the same sort of, fields and other things, then, Azure storage kind of falls naturally into that. I had a customer ask about Google Cloud Platform yesterday, and they offer a, essentially a rip and replace of S3 on their platform that, allows the same.
Yeah. Good question. I mean, that's where we want to, obviously we're looking for feedback to understand how people want the data ingested and using it, so that, I mean, that's helpful to understand about Azure too.
Yeah,
Sure.
as Steve mentioned, the quote unquote Splunk connection is relatively generic, and we have already seen it used in the first couple of weeks of this feature, already being used in other platforms. So I think the answer is to give it a try in your platform if it has an API similar to Splunk, and Splunk is a very popular SIEM, and a lot of other platforms use the same API similar to S3. And our goal is to make the first iterations generic as possible, and then get more fine grain as we go forward.
Great. So we could see a V2 or a .1 release where we're supporting more. Is that what you're saying?
Honestly, I think it's just about us being better in our documentation and revealing, and not so specific on it's got to be Splunk. I think it's more of we're using this connector method that is HTTP event collection that pretty much I've seen all the SIEMs really support, because Splunk's been the leader in that. They started it. Others are supporting it for direct integration or ingestion of the data. So I think that's probably more on us for documenting, and then maybe down the road just a better kind of naming of those connections too.
Yeah, and these are the ones that we've tested and know that work. But as we learn more, we'll update the documentation.
Gotcha. So is there that direct connection, that API to direct to a SIEM? Is that something that's available? That's one of the questions that came in.
Yeah, I think that the point there is, the bucket method is an intermediary where we're dropping the CSV file, so you got to have them drop there and then go into the SIEM. I think the HTTP event collector method that I talked, which is the Splunk connection, but heck underneath the covers, what a great name, is that kind of direct integration or the direct API. If not, we could spend some more time and talk with that specific individual about their SIEM and how they'd like to see it. I mean, again, this is our first iteration. Feedback is more than welcome, and we'd love to kind of understand customer use cases better.
Gotcha. Where can we talk a little bit for a second about the fields that are exported?
Which field in particular? What's your favorite one?
Well, I guess we need to talk about, what maybe those specifics are. I think we were looking at a number of 30 plus, right?
Yeah, so really, if you think about data export, we have the query log in the DNSFilter product. everything you're seeing there is what's being exported then in all those fields. So I know some competitors may not have all those pieces, but everything you see in the query log is what we're exporting and allowing you to ingest into your SIEM to use that data for correlation and actioning, whether it's IP address. I don't think we're doing favorite color, but Mikey and Carl, you can chime in on some of your other favorites.
I was just gonna point out, I think Corey dropped the link to the help documentation in the chat box for the webinar, and you can see at the bottom of that help documentation the field names essentially and a description. Yeah. So like as we're exporting them to the S3 bucket, we're not using any headers on those files just to ease the import, but you can see what each field name and description is there to do some mapping if you have to.
Actually, and to that point, I'm sorry, Steve. I think we were probably going to say the same thing. Maybe.
Well,
about, a certain competitor.
Yeah, you go for it.
All right. So, for those that are moving away from Cisco Umbrella, we've mapped our fields to be identical. So that makes for a seamless transition out of that product and into ours.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, I mean, there's other data fields that you're looking for that aren't there. Again, all great feedback for us to learn and understand from.
Yeah, super important. And Steve, you dropped your email in there, so that's a direct, but there is of course the capability to provide that feedback to us in a way that's going to get logged and get a lot of eyes on it too. So all right, quick lightning round here to wrap us up. Carl, Mikey, Steve, what are orgs going to miss out on without this data? Carl, let's start with you.
Sure. I think, we touched on this earlier. This just gives a richer context to everything going on inside your infrastructure. DNS is a fundamental routing protocol of the internet, and everything that has a name has to map to a number somehow. And if we can map that data across other events and incidents that are happening in your infrastructure, that is going to allow you to pinpoint things a lot quicker.
And kind of piggyback off that, I mean, I think that a lot of organizations are they are spending the money on better cybersecurity posture, and I think this helps with that, painting the picture. And I'll use that word threat hunting, but it is really about proactive security measures to kind of figure out what's going on in your organization. And I think that is what a lot of organizations are striving for, and now there's a very shared importance about having that better security posture. So I think this is a piece to that overall puzzle.
Yeah, it's the correlation of this valuable DNS data that you haven't had easy access to before, correlating it with all of your other systems. So I think correlation is really the key word.
Got it. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for being able to join today. There's a lot to take a look at here, but if you do have further questions or need more information, we've got the link down there to be able to reach that in the chat section. And then Steve provided his email as well. That's also dropped in that chat. So thanks to the group. Thanks for everybody who joined today. We will certainly be talking to you again soon.
Yeah, hope you stay cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No kidding.
I'm always cool, Steve.
Always cool.
Sounds good.
All right, take it easy.